Listen closely, because you need to grasp the gravity of the situation unfolding in the UAE right now. We aren't just watching another routine diplomatic summit. This marks the very first moment since the invasion began that American representatives are physically in the same room with both Russian and Ukrainian officials simultaneously. The consequences have never been higher, largely because Donald Trump has engineered a scenario that seemed impossible. He convinced Vladimir Putin to halt the bombardment of Ukrainian cities during one of the harshest winters in memory. However, there is a major catch. No one seems to agree on what that deal actually entails. Set the scene. It is January 23rd in Abu Dhabi, the heart of the United Arab Emirates. Inside a secure facility, behind locked doors, 3 distinct delegations are taking their seats at a shared table for the first time. Leading the charge for the United States is Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy, sitting next to Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law. Representing Ukraine are their heavy hitters, Chief Negotiator Rustem Umerov and Intelligence Chief Kirilo Budanov. And the Russians. They didn't send diplomats. They sent General Igor Kostyukov, the head of the GRU. When Moscow sends military intelligence directors instead of foreign ministers, it tells you exactly what kind of game is being played. I'm Herrick McCain. Welcome to Fire Point. If you want the raw truth without the filter, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now, because the information I am about to share completely reshapes the narrative regarding the future of this conflict and the actual terms Trump is hammering out in the shadows. Let's get to the reality of what happened. The mainstream headlines are obsessed with Trump's flashy announcement that Putin agreed to a 1-week pause on bombing Kiev due to the freezing weather. But that is a distraction. The real story is what these 3 parties are haggling over in Abu Dhabi that will either end this war or blow it wide open. It boils down to the one question everyone is afraid to ask: how much Ukrainian land will Russia be allowed to keep? If you aren't familiar with Steve Witkoff, you need to know who Trump picked to handle Putin. Witkoff is not a career diplomat. He is a New York real estate tycoon, a longtime friend, and a business partner of the president. Yet, he holds more authority to settle this conflict than the entire State Department. Witkoff flew directly from a 4-hour sit-down with Putin at the Kremlin straight to Abu Dhabi. Putin met him until 3 in the morning. That proves how seriously the Kremlin views this back channel, and it gets even more intriguing. Intelligence suggests Witkoff actually coached Yuri Ushakov, Putin's foreign policy aide, on the best way to sell their peace proposal to Trump. Just let that sink in. An American envoy teaching the Russians how to manipulate the American president. Let's rewind to January 22nd. Trump sits down with Zelensky at the World Economic Forum in Davos. In private, Trump informs Zelensky that a deal is within reach, but he is blunt. Ukraine must make painful concessions, specifically regarding territory. Zelensky walks out of that room and immediately announces trilateral talks starting the next day in Abu Dhabi. This broke the 4-year diplomatic freeze between Washington, Kiev, and Moscow. Next came the marathon session in Moscow. Witkoff and Kushner touched down late Thursday. They are rushed to the Kremlin to find Putin waiting. A meeting scheduled for 60 minutes drags on for over 4 hours, ending past 3 norm, Imon, 8m. Ushakov emerges to call the talks exceptionally substantive and surprisingly trusting. You rarely hear that language from the Kremlin. But he also dropped the hammer. Putin's territorial demands haven't budged. Russia wants the entirety of the Donetsk region. All of it, including the 25% that Ukraine still fiercely defends. The delegations convene in Abu Dhabi on Friday. The summit spans 2 days. Both sides use polite words like constructive, but there is no breakthrough. The Americans put forward a peace framework. Ukraine says they talked about parameters to end the war. Russia stays silent, calling it a working group on security. Then, Trump drops his bombshell. He claims Putin agreed to stop striking Ukrainian energy grids for a week, or perhaps just Kyiv, or maybe only until February 1st. The specifics immediately started to blur. Then came the statement that cut through the noise. Trump told his cabinet that he personally asked Putin to hold fire on Kiev and other towns during the extreme cold, and Putin agreed. Read between the lines. Trump didn't use the State Department or the Pentagon. He used direct, personal leverage to get a pause on attacks against civilians. Putin said yes, but the details are messy. The Kremlin tells a different story. Their spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, confirmed the agreement but narrowed the scope significantly. He said it applies only to Kiev, and only until February 1st. That was just 2 days from the announcement. Not a week, not all cities, just the capital. Peskov wouldn't even clarify if this meant all missiles or just attacks on the power grid. Ukraine's stance? Zelensky thanked Trump but walked on eggshells. He stated clearly, there is no ceasefire. There is no signed document. There was no direct conversation between Ukraine and Russia on this topic. It was a reciprocal understanding discussed in Abu Dhabi. If Russia holds fire on the grid, Ukraine will too. But nothing is signed in ink. Here is the strategic reality. Trump is branding himself as the ultimate dealmaker, the only man who can pick up the phone and get Putin to stop the shooting. He wants to end the war that the previous administration couldn't. But he is bypassing the entire diplomatic machine to do it, relying on business partners and family members to negotiate directly with a dictator while squeezing Zelensky to capitulate. What makes this moment historic is that we are finally seeing the nuts and bolts of Trump's peace plan. It is built on a framework leaked back in November, reportedly drafted by Witkoff and Russian insider Kirill Dmitriev. The terms are brutal. Ukraine legally cedes Crimea to Russia. Russia gains de facto control over all of Luhansk and Donetsk, even the areas they haven't captured. In Kherson and Zaporizhia, the front lines freeze where they are. Russia might return tiny pockets of land. The Ukrainian military is slashed from 900,000 to 600,000 personnel. NATO membership is permanently off the table. Ukraine must hold elections within 100 days. And the kicker? The surrendered areas of Donbass become a demilitarized zone, but with zero enforcement to stop Russia from marching back in later. Analysts suggest this is just an opening bid, a classic negotiation tactic. The plan has already been trimmed from 28 points down to 20. Some extreme demands were softened. Ukraine might keep 800,000 troops, and security guarantees involving Europe are being debated. But that analysis ignores the Russian perspective. Moscow views this as a victory. They see Trump forcing Ukraine to hand over land that the Russian army failed to capture in battle. They see a willingness to trade Ukrainian sovereignty for a political win. They are betting that if Zelensky refuses, Trump will blame Kiev and pull the plug on aid. So, what is the next move? Talks kick off again on February 4th and 5th in Abu Dhabi. The same teams are returning, but now they are negotiating under a fragile energy truce that is already confusing. In the short term, watch the skies. If Russia resumes striking power plants this week, Putin is using the pause as a psychological weapon. He gives Trump a PR win while his army grinds forward. If the pause holds, it means Putin believes he can win everything he wants at the conference table. In the medium term, the clock is ticking toward February 24th, the 4-year anniversary of the invasion. Trump wants a signed deal by then. He has missed deadlines before, but he is personally exposed on this one. He has warned Zelensky that American generosity has limits. Europe is watching with bated breath, Germany is rearming, Poland is sending more aid, and France and Britain are looking at security pacts. But they are realists. They know Ukraine cannot hold the line forever without the United States. Here is my read on the situation. It all comes down to Donetsk. Everything else is just noise. Crimea is gone. Everyone accepts that privately. The southern front can be frozen. Ukraine can survive that with the right guarantees. But Donetsk is the kill zone. If Ukraine withdraws from the territory they still hold there, they lose their best fortifications. Cities like Kramatorsk and Slovyansk, they would be handing over the high ground to a demilitarized zone that Russia can violate at will. The best-case scenario. Ukraine and Europe draw a line in the sand regarding territory. They secure a coalition of the willing to put boots on the ground for security, a massive reconstruction fund, fast-track EU entry. The fighting stops, monitors move in, and Ukraine keeps the parts of Donetsk it still controls. Russia gets sanctions relief, and the conflict freezes, but Ukraine survives as a sovereign state. The middle path? Ukraine sacrifices some of Donetsk but keeps the key fortresses. Russia gets formal recognition of its conquests. Ukraine gets security guarantees, but without American troops. It's essentially a third Minsk agreement, a volatile peace that could explode at any second. The nightmare scenario? Trump decides Zelensky is being stubborn and cuts off military supplies. Europe tries to step up but fails to fill the void. The Ukrainian front collapses. Russia overruns Donetsk and then pushes for the rest of the south. Zelensky is forced to sign a surrender or fight a guerrilla war alone. Trump blames Ukraine for choosing war over peace, while Russia spends 5 years rebuilding its army for the next invasion. Keep your eyes on these indicators. Does the truce last past this week? That reveals Putin's sincerity. Does Trump arrange a face-to-face with Putin and Zelensky? If he puts them in the same room, a deal is imminent. If not, it's just theater. How does Europe react? Are they united or fracturing? And listen to Zelensky. If he talks about progress, he is buckling under pressure. If he talks about red lines, he is digging in for a fight. This goes beyond Ukraine. It threatens the entire post-war global order. If Trump successfully coerces an ally to surrender land to an invader, he sets a new precedent. He tells the world that America will sacrifice friends for a quick deal. He tells China that patience pays off. He signals to every dictator that borders are merely suggestions if the price is right. Ultimately, this defines what America has become. Do we stand for democracy and sovereignty, or are we simply transaction brokers indifferent to the moral cost? Trump views this as a business dispute. Split the difference, shake hands, claim the win. But this isn't Manhattan real estate. This is about a democracy that surrendered its nuclear arsenal for American protection, now facing abandonment because the cost became inconvenient. History won't care about the specific coordinates of the new border. History will record whether America stood with a free nation or forced them to their knees. It will decide if Trump was a peacemaker or an enabler of conquest. That is the legacy on the line. That is the reality of what happened in Abu Dhabi and why the sessions on February 4th and 5th are pivotal. This isn't about cold weather or power grids. This is about whether Trump will force Ukraine to carve up its own territory to give him a political victory, and whether Europe and Ukraine can hold out for a deal that ensures their survival. If this breakdown gave you clarity on the real stakes behind the headlines, smash that like button and subscribe to Firepoint, because this story is just beginning. The negotiators are back at the table this week. Trump is demanding a deal. Putin is playing the long game, and Zelensky is trapped between a rock and a hard place. Let me know in the comments. Should Ukraine trade land for peace or fight until every inch is recovered? I'm Herrick McCain, and I'll see you in the next video.